Good morning. Thank you so much for showing up at the voice control session. We're really excited about having these first time ever Cedia panels. I'm Pam Golden. I helped put these together for Cedia. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce my friend Michael Artsis, who is the founder and CEO of BeTerrific, an online video technology streaming organization that covers technology and shares information with the mass consumer about all the great things going on in tech. And he will then moderate this panel and run the discussion for about 45 minutes, and then we would leave about 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. Well, he'll ask you to come up and ask your question and identify yourself and your company before you ask the question. At this point, I'd like to say welcome to the panel, and thank you, Michael, and have a good time.
Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. And welcome. This is voice control for home automation, and we're going to be talking about where that's going, the future of it, and where it is today. We've got a wonderful panel I'm going to introduce in a minute, but I just wanted to say this is the Amazon Tap. And I've been a fan of home automation since the mid-90s, and I think that voice control, because of this device and the family of Alexa devices from Amazon, is finally here. And it's finally practical, and I think it's what's going to push automation and control both into the masses and forward, and it represents the future. And I think that this is really the starting point, and it's very exciting. So I'd like to introduce the panel that we have. We've got a great group of guests. First of all, we've got Alex from Josh.ai. Josh.ai is a way of connecting all of this and controlling all this using, in many cases, the microphones from the Amazon Echo, the Tap, and the Dot. And we'll explain a little bit about that, but it's a wonderful platform, and it runs off a Mac Mini, so it's very simple to integrate. And I think that that's also a key to all this, is integration and being, having voice control be the center point and bringing it all together, especially when you have a lot of different things. We've got Dan from Amazon, and he's worked on the Alexa and the Tap and the Dot, and wonderful. I'm very excited about that. They've done a phenomenal job making voice control just really, really robust, but also easy to use. And the idea is that it understands what you're saying now, finally, instead of having to yell across a room and tell it 10 times. We've got Patrick from Cybermanor. They're a company that integrates all this technology together to automate your home or your business, and they do a phenomenal job. Some of the most amazing work I've seen in putting all this together. These guys do a phenomenal job, and they do very, very high-end work for many celebrities and for regular people like us. And then, of course, we've got Ram, and he's from a company called Securify, and Securify has a router that's very easy to set up. It starts with that. It's got a touch screen. It's called the Almond router, and they are on their third version now, I believe. And it's an easy router to set up. A lot of people, that's their biggest stumbling point, but this takes it one step further. It's also a smart hub, so it helps integrate all these products together. And so that's for the do-it-yourselfers, really, which is a big part of this. So with that, I'm going to just start opening it up to questions from myself. Eventually, we'll open it up to questions from you guys, and we'll have a great panel here. Thank you again for joining us. So I think that voice command has really pushed the industry forward, and it has really integrated all these things. It's become the centerpiece. When you walk into a room that's automated or even controlled by smart devices, you have to open your phone, open an app, figure out what you want to do. If you want to go from the lights to now the thermostat, you got to open another app to do that. It's kind of clunky. If you have a high-end system like Control 4 or Questron, you got to find that panel where it is in your house, or you got to open the app on your phone. And it gets confusing for a lot of people. It's also hard to update. But I think voice command changes all that, especially when it's something that's as accessible as the Amazon devices and as good as those devices. Can you guys talk to how much easier it makes that, just being able to walk in a room and say, I'm home, and have it paint the scene, change the temperature, or to specifically say, Alexa, turn on Jill's lamp?
Sure, do you want just go down the road?
Yeah. Go down the road.
All right. So first off, I just want to thank everyone for being here. Last year, we were just starting Josh.ai, and a lot of my conversations were about convincing you why voice mattered. That was before the Echo really blew up. It's been around for a couple of years, but it wasn't really as well known a year ago. And the transformation in the last 12 months has been amazing, and just the fact that you're all here speaks to that. So just thank you all for being here. In terms of what we've seen, voice is a tremendous capability, but it's not perfect for every situation. What we find is for complicated scenarios, if you're trying to control an entire room, an entire floor, maybe the other part of the house where you don't want to otherwise go to that room, voice is really nice. If you walk into a dark kitchen, saying turn on the lights without fumbling for a switch is great. That being said, there are times where you're not near a microphone, maybe you're right next to a switch, and hitting a switch is actually simpler. And so our guiding principle is always, what is the simplest thing for the end user? What's going to make their life really natural, really easy, and allow them to live with their connected home in a way that doesn't annoy them and doesn't get them frustrated because their stuff doesn't seem to work? And so voice seems to really lower that barrier. A great example that we find is with music. Right now, if you're controlling music, you're basically having to go through multiple UI interfaces, you're typing in, you're basically having to be pretty specific. But what we've done with our integration with Sonos, Meridian, Autonomic, is enable just really natural voice commands, stuff like play the song Ride. You're not saying where to play it, you're not saying on what service, you're not saying who it's sung by, but the system figures it out immediately and starts playing 21 Pilots' song Ride. You can say an album, you can play an artist, you can say a genre. The Echo does the same thing. And so it's stuff like that where you otherwise would have to type, would have to spend a lot of time in the UI, you'd have to open up apps. That's where voice is really magical. But again, really think about voice is not the only solution that I think is going to replace everything. I think it's an and. You're going to have switches, remotes, tablets, and voice. And it's that combination that really changes the whole environment.
That's great. That's great, Alex. Thank you. And thank you for being here as well. It's been an eye-opening experience for me to work for a company like Amazon, and I haven't been with them a very long time, so I can't take a lot of credit for the engineering that has gone in to the Echo and to the Tap and to the into the Dot. But I'm focused on whole home experiences for home automation at Amazon. My job there is leading an engineering team and a product unit to develop these kinds of experiences that Alex so eloquently discussed with you. And I think the number one thing to point out is that, I've been with Cedia since 1999. I've been in and out of this market, and I've seen the growth of technology that comes through this this channel, and the leadership that the integrator and the manufacturers that are in these in this channel take it. In fact, in a session earlier this morning, I heard someone refer to the work that they do as like helping people engineer new products, and that's really true. And if you think about the like the touchscreen interface that entered this market about the same time I did in the late 90s, look where that interface has gone in the past 16, 17 years. We're at day one with voice today. We now have a viable voice interface. A lot of that has come from the ability to scale with the cloud and to get the sheer number of utterances that are required to build the statistical models that make that kind of accuracy work. But it's also technology, like the far-field microphone technology that's part of the Echo Dot and the Echo itself. So what the message I'd like to say about voice, while all of these things are great and where we're going is, what we can do today is amazing. You can stop by our booth or Alex's booth and see some outstanding integrations with the brands that you're familiar with. We're just starting. And because of our ability to scale and because of our ability to increment our way to the future, this is a technology that isn't static. You're not putting something in the home today that will be the same 5 years from now. It'll be very different. And I'm extremely excited to see what we can do with partnering with the Cedia integrator and technologists.
Hi, I'm Pat with Cybermanor. I feel obligated to thank everybody for being here. I don't want to be missing out of my cohorts here. So as an integrator, we spend a lot of time thinking about use cases. We think a lot about creating expectations, surprise and delight. How do we integrate voice into what we do day in and day out? We've had the great fortune to work with Amazon now over the last several months, installing several systems that we've used a variety of intermediary systems like Control4 and Simple Control, and worked with Josh around how do you integrate this in a whole home environment. And so we've had the ability to really try this in real world environments, and it's a great learning experience. I think as Dan said, it's still early days. There's pros and cons. It's as much about setting expectations as anything else. And I think to echo what Josh said, or what Alex said, it's about an and conversation, not an or conversation, right? It's highly unlikely that voice is going to kill all other forms of interaction that we've been using for years. There are use case after use case that we've run into in the installs that we've done where voice wasn't appropriate. A nursery or a kid's bedroom. The last thing you want to do is make a lot of noise with voice as you're walking out of that room trying to turn off the lights and lower the blinds. So we have to be cognizant of the fact that, one is it's an evolving technology, so expectations have to be set appropriately, and two, the use cases will continue to evolve. And we've had certainly a handful of clients who were very much naysayers going into it. And once they saw the use cases and they saw how we could solve problems that they hadn't even realized using voice, all of a sudden we have somebody who's just so excited to use it on a daily basis. So that's what's got us excited about it, is it's this inflection point, not unlike 2007 with the iPhone and 2010 with the iPad, in how we see our clients interacting with their homes.
This is Ram from Securify. Again, I want to thank everyone for this opportunity. I couldn't agree more with what Dan said, that this is day one or day zero with voice. I'll give a simple example. We make routers that also work as DIY smart hubs. Usually we have run into this situation that our customers call as spouse acceptance factor. It tended to be pretty low with smart home products, even when you have an app. Take a simple example. You want to turn off your living room light because movie is coming on the TV. Oftentimes, it's actually easier to take a step from the couch and turn it off rather than find your phone, find the app, find the switch, and assuming all of these steps go right. I think voice, so when you have an app-based product, a lot of our customers said their spouses thought it was actually a dumber home perhaps, because sometimes they couldn't use their real switch anymore because they had to do it from the app. Now this probably doesn't apply to the custom high-end installations that Alex and Pat does.
It does
but
for some members.
Yeah, in the DIY space, you got these smart plugs where you only can control through apps. So with voice, what we felt was, for the first time, you have a product in the smart home space that has the spouse acceptance factor, because anyone can sit in the couch. You don't have to fumble around with your phones. You can just give a command and, it just works. So we are huge fans of what Amazon has done and where this industry is going with, some of the advanced stuff that Alex is doing at Josh. So actually today I have a brief announcement to make. So we have an update to our Alexa skill where you can block your kids' internet.
Wow.
Not everyone's gonna like that, but you can just say, Alexa, tell Armin to block kids' internet. By the way, you cannot unblock using Alexa because your kids would unblock right away. And the second thing is the ability to turn on and turn off the guest Wi-Fi network. So we just see voice as a huge thing, way beyond just smart home, smart lights, thermostats. There is, what we are announcing today is, again, just the beginning. We just see potential to do a lot more with voice, with Wi-Fi, with I can't even imagine what we'll be doing next year, frankly.
Ram, your product is very much a do-it-yourself product. Obviously, an integrator can use it, but it's very much a do-it-yourself. And the Amazon Echo Den is very much a do-it-yourself product as well, although it can also be integrated, and you can have it in multiple locations in the home, or I have one at home and one in the office, and I can sit in my office and turn off my lights at home, or adjust the thermostats at home. Is that something the integrators have to be worried about, that people can do it themselves? It's in my mind, it's not, because I think that the people who are going to do it themselves were never going to hire an integrator anyway. But I think that, and it only helps push the whole industry forward.
I mean, that's a great question, because it is a requirement in some cases for integrators to lock down the systems, because some of the systems that they integrate are complex, and it takes someone with the skill and the knowledge to know how to integrate them. In our booth there's some great examples of how you can combine both sets of technologies. One is locked down, but the router, I mean, think about that, right? Think about how something that was so hard before. I mean, who here has tried to punch a hole through a router? Raise your hand. Who here doesn't know how to do that? Oh, come on. No one wants to, but it's hard, and we've taken something useful, something that's important, and now that's something that a customer can do, that doesn't require, rolling a truck or do it. That is something that they can turn on and off at night when their kids are supposed to be doing homework, or when they want to enable their guest access to Wi-Fi. I mean, those are perfect examples of how voice simplifies something that is very technical, but but it doesn't detract at all from the integrator.
I do think it expands the market in a way. Once people get a flavor for what you can do with DIY products, because oftentimes we used to think, at least in the range, price ranges where we sell our products, cost is the biggest factor. But even at our price range, the installation is actually still something. I know there's some newer, I think through Amazon, you can actually ask for an installer when you purchase products now. So we think there is certainly a lot of value for installation, because we used to think actually cost is the biggest factor, because we are going for mass market consumer type product. But setting up the smart home, setting up the rules, scenes, that there is quite a bit of friction in all of that. So we think it actually expands the market, almost orthogonal, DIY versus.
Yep. Well, I think from the integrator standpoint, probably speaking for most of you out there, if you're going to do a one-room studio, knock yourself out. But that's not what we do, right? We're doing multi-room, large houses, 3,000, 5,000, 8,000, 15,000 square foot houses. That's not something that the average homeowner is going to embark upon on their own. So we see it as this enabling technology that says, we used to do lighting, we used to do Sonos, all the subsystems that we've been doing for years, we still do. This hasn't replaced what we do in the home from a subsystem standpoint. This just layers over the top of it. And so we see it as an opportunity to actually sell more. In our experience so far, having done these projects with Amazon, particularly with the, kind of the naysayer who starts out and says, I'm not going to use this, as they start using it, they then ask for more. And so in every case, literally every case so far, they've said, can you come back and put in more light switches? Can you come back and add some more Sonos? Can you come back and put in some smart irrigation? So what turns out to be the early conversation, once they see it work, turns out to be this fantastic opportunity to not only sell more product, but also sell more services. And so we see it, as a huge opportunity that for us personally, the DIY is just a completely different avenue that isn't really threatening as it relates to what we're doing in large-scale homes.
Patrick, do you then worry about the general contractor getting involved in the space and saying, well, look, it's pretty easy to do this. I can do this now, and kind of boxing you out or trying to?
Yeah, it turns out it's not that easy. I mean, so you guys, everybody in this room has dealt with networks, right? This is no different than every other subsystem that we install. You have to get the network right. And, it turns out we as integrators have become network experts as much as we've become everything else that we've always done. So, if a general contractor really wants to become an integrator and spend his life doing network configuration, network installation, making sure all the subsystems are installed correctly, then they're really an integrator. They've stopped becoming a general contractor. Because to do this on a multi-room, large-scale, scalable way takes a lot more than just plugging a couple things in the wall. So I guess to answer your question it's a completely different market segment at that point.
I was a naysayer to voice control. And I said, why do we need this? It complicates things. It doesn't work well. It's clunky. Until this, the Amazon experience with Alexa. It really does make life a lot simpler. You're holding your son or your daughter, or you're running around, and you can say, turn off the lights, turn on the lights, change the temperature, do all this. The one area I found is still clunky is televisions. I really wanted to control my television now. I want to lay in bed, the remote's on the other side of the bed, on my wife's nightstand. I could roll across the bed, sure. I could get out of bed, sure. But can I just tell Alexa to change the channel on the TV? You can. It's hard. I had to hook up a Harmony hub to my setup. I don't have a home automation system. And then I had to do the IFTTT, which is IFTT.org, TTT.org. And you have to create recipes and set up basically rules, and basically Amazon Alexa talks to the Harmony hub through the IFTTT, and it takes about 40 seconds for it to work, and sometimes it works really, really nicely, and sometimes it doesn't. How will that move forward? I know that a lot of the television manufacturers really want to keep their APIs locked down. They're afraid for some reason. I don't understand why manufacturers would be afraid of this technology, but how is that going to evolve, and how much of that do you see playing a part going forward as it evolves?
Well, media is an important aspect to our customers, and while I can't speculate on work that may or may not be in progress at the moment, live TV is an important use case for consumers, and to make that to ignore the fact that being able to change a channel or have access to an electronic program guide, in an interface like Alexa would be not very smart, I think. So, it's, again, day one. There's, the great thing about Amazon is we ship code every 2 weeks. There's something new coming out every 2 weeks to Amazon. Sometimes you see it, sometimes we make a big noise about it. But the email that, I don't know, how many here have an Echo or are using it right now? So every week there's a what's new with Alexa email. As it turns out, that's one of the, I think in the company's history, that's the most read. The click-through rates on it are the highest ever. So we agree that it's hard to to turn off a TV from when you're in bed and to change channels, and we want to make that better.
Excellent.
I'll talk a little bit about how we're approaching the problem, and we're basically splitting it into two different categories. One category of AV control is really the control of turning the thing on and going to the right source. The other aspect is deep linking, so I want to watch a particular show or movie or channel. When it comes to turning the devices on, we've been integrating that for years. We have products like Global Cache that enable IR and RS-232 and all these different things. So voice control of that is actually not that hard as long as the integration's set up. And what's great about that is we find it's not channel flipping that people want to do with voice, it's turning the damn thing on. When you have 3 remotes and you don't know which one you turn on and which one's the cable box, to be able to say, put on the Apple TV in the kitchen. That's really most of what people are trying to solve today. And then you get the remote and you sort of browse around and you're happy. It's getting the thing on. When you're leaving, it's turn everything off and you just want it to go off. So the control side of things you'll see a lot sooner. That side, those problems we've been solving for a long time, and a lot of that is none of this is trivial, but it's the easier side. The harder aspect is deep linking. So for example, Roku is great when it comes to certain APIs. we're able to say, and this is in development, it's not in production, but watch Game of Thrones in the kitchen. We understand that Game of Thrones is on HBO, you have HBO on your Apple TV, it deep links all the way through and it gets you there. That being said, Apple TV does not have deep linking, at least not now, and they don't have an API that's open, so you can't deep link to Apple TV the same way. The difference is with all the different systems, Comcast and TiVo and all of this, they need to be participating in the conversation or we really don't have access in. I think we're gonna see that changing. Those conversations are all happening. But I think what we'll see is the first wave is the control and deep linking will follow later on.
Yeah, and so the projects we've done so far has been a bit of a decision-making tree around what intermediary devices do we put between Amazon and the subsystems. So between the Alexa and the subsystem, do we put a Control 4? Do we use Simple Control? Do we use Josh? You know, unfortunately, the quiver is getting larger with our choices there. But the early projects we did, there were really only a couple options. And you know, the old TV watching zone has been one of the classic automation areas of the house for a long time, and that was one of the really important use cases that we looked at. So for the very first project, we happened to use Simple Control simply because they handle AV really well. And so with great ease, we put a couple global caches on receivers, on TVs, on some video sources, and a hell of a lot easier in Harmony, I'll tell you. Next time you go down that path, I'll let you know. You know, it just worked. And so, again, one of the naysayers, we were able to say, you know, stand at the kitchen island in the great room and say, you know, Alexa, in this case, they named their house Cuckoo, and we'll talk about that later, but, you know, Alexa, tell Cuckoo to pause the TV in the family room. And sure enough, the TV pauses. And the lady, you know, she's there cooking and she's got a kid in one arm, just thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And fortunately, we could do some deep linking on that and say, you know, turn on ESPN in the family room. And it worked. TV changes to ESPN. So again, early days, and be careful setting expectations, but there are ways to solve these problems now. It just, as you go down these forks in the road of decision making around which subsystems you have and which intermediary devices. And we see it for quite some time that, at least in our world, we're going to have an intermediary device between the Amazon product and our subsystems. It could be Josh, it could be Control 4, it could be Simple Control, you know, name your platform. But in all likelihood, to do the kind of work that the folks in this room do, we're going to need that intermediary device in there. And then it's a question of whether the smart home skill that exists continues to adapt, which no doubt it will, and custom skills that'll be written over time.
I'll just say, as far as they can afford it, the customer just wants to know that when they say the voice command, it works. They really don't even care what's going on inside, as long as it works.
And a great intermediary device is Fire TV, which has a microphone on it, and Fire TV now has Alexa in it, and you can do things like, I'd like to watch Game of Thrones, and it'll navigate you right there. It's not point and click.
What about the idea that this makes life a lot simpler, but you kind of have to learn also, I don't want to say a new lexicon, but you need to almost learn a new language, because you need to learn that this is called master bedroom, that's called master bedroom lights, that's called Michael's lamp, that's called, you know, whatever, and you have to remember all this. And while it seems simple that you could tell somebody who walks into your house, a guest, hey, just walk into that room and say, turn on guest bedroom lights, you really have to tell them a bunch of other things too. Is that a stumbling point? Is that a hard thing, especially for integrators when you're dealing with customers? And then is that something that's going to change where, you know, it'll be more flexible? It really will become an AI, an artificial intelligence, and understand a little bit more of what you're saying, and you don't have to get it exactly accurate as to how it's been named.
You'd be amazed how far it is along that path already. So one of the things that Alexa does amazingly well is, if I kind of do the structure of activity in room, so I say turn on the TV in the family room, I can also say turn on the living room, or family, I'll stick with the same rooms. I turn on the family room TV, turn on the TV in the family room, turn on family room TV, turn on the TV in the family room. I can use all those and it figures it out. So it's able to parse what I've said, and it works toward the intent rather than the specific set of words that I've stitched together. And so the huge advances in this, and these guys can talk about it far deeper than I can, but we're getting to the point now where voice starts discovering intent rather than just phrase recognition. And when it discovers intent, it now gets interesting for us, because Now we don't have to teach so many different things. And yes, we might have to have some aliases for rooms. One of the projects we did, their kid's name is Wyatt, and they wanted to be able to say, turn off the lights in Wyatt's room, or turn off the lights in the nursery. Could be the same room, but each of them called it something slightly different. And so we're able to put in aliases, and one person can say, turn off the lights in Wyatt's room, and the other person can say, turn the lights off in the nursery. And they both work. And that's where this really starts to work. But it takes that sophisticated intermediary device. It takes a Josh or a Control4 or in the middle that takes care of a lot of that. Currently at least, you can't go straight from Alexa to a lighting system and have it do those kind of that kind of intelligence. If you use a Harmony, you have to be very specific about how you name the rooms, and if you get it wrong, you're out of luck.
And to your point, though, you said two different people calling the room a different thing, but I could walk into my son Jack's room and call it Jack's room, and I could call it later the nursery, just because that's how we talk, right? We know it as both things. How about for you guys? Do you see that as? I see Dan smiling. I think he wants to not say something.
That's okay. We like to think of supplying senses to Alexa as we build the product out. She has a great sense of hearing now. And we're adding senses of vision, and through sensors, smell, through other interfaces, touch. But one important sense is location. Knowing where Alexa is in relationship to a home is very important. The kind of utterances that we're looking for are intelligent. You can do some of this now with Alex's software, where as long as we understand where Alexa is in the home, we can react to things like turn off the lights or raise the temperature. We don't have to name specific devices. Naming is a big issue. Voice, we call it VUI, voice user interface, opposed to GUI. So one of the new things that this audience is, and many of the people here are going to be developing over the next few years, is the interaction models for your customers that allow their intent to inform the intermediary device. And there's a skill to that. It's different than GUI. It's different than a touchscreen interface. You need to think about the lack of context. And we have a term for it. We call it cognitive load. So our job is to reduce the amount of cognitive load that is required to do that. And then to that specific instance, being able to go into a room like this and say, turn off the lights and have them on cue, go off. That's the experience we want to be able to provide for customers, not turn off light number 7C25D. We don't want to have people just can't remember that.
Is this something that will also be assisted in your mind by? I mean, we all have wearables now, or not all of us, but a lot of us have Apple watches or Samsung watches or Android Wear. Between our phones and our tablets and our wearables, even something like a Fitbit tracker that you might be wearing, is it something that this technology can in the future work with, know exactly which room you're in or which part of the room, and feel intent? Again, you might be saying turn off the lights in the room. You're saying this room that I'm in. You're not going to say that and talk about the nursery upstairs, but obviously you could want to also turn the lights off in the nursery.
Just to sort of talk to that question, but also the previous question, our guiding principle is certainly not to make someone learn something new. The question is, do they have to learn a new language or a new lexicon? If we're doing our jobs right, they don't. Our job is to get out of their way and let them speak as natural as they want to speak, and the system should work. Of course, there's a lot between where we are now and where that eventually needs to get to, but as Dan was talking about, we're constantly making progress towards that goal. And so what we do at the Echo, which is in a fixed position, it's plugged in, it's not moving. If you have Josh in the home, you assign each of those echoes or dots to a room. And so we understand that if you say turn on the lights from this dot, which is in the kitchen, you're localized to the kitchen. And so that's one way that today we can already do that. Now this is only getting better. That being said, your question about wearables, the thing about voice that's really interesting is you really don't want to change human behavior. If you tell a homeowner, you can have great voice control, but you have to wear this bracelet, they look at it like a handcuff. It's not going to happen. And so what we're doing is we're tracking what people already use. If smartwatches really take off, which as of now, most of our customers don't wear them, if they take off, great, we're going to put microphones right there, it's going to be great. But if they don't take off, let's use what they have. They have a phone in their pocket, they have Echoes throughout the home, they have a computer somewhere, their car probably has a microphone. Let's use what they're most used to, because the goal is really to get out of their way. One of the things, though, about learning and teaching them that's tricky is, right now, if you have a poorly integrated home, and they say, I can turn on my lights and I can, change the temperature, but that's all I can do, they have to learn and know that, and when new people come into the home, they're saying, well, what about opening my gate? What about playing music? What about turning off the TV? And all of a sudden, it feels like it's not a natural system, because they have to remember what it can and can't do.
And there's our opportunity.
Right.
Exactly, and that's why this industry matters so much for voice. We call our system Josh, they call it Alexa. Think of it like, if you were to tell someone in the home, can you turn off the TV? Can you open the front door? Can you, make it a little cooler in here? That person understands what you're saying. That's what we're trying to do with our systems.
And up until now, and I really believe that we've hit an inflection point here, a huge one. We've always talked about, helping our customer adopt technology, or it's always been work on, that's required from the customer to do this. You have to teach them this. You have to show them this, and a lot of the effort that you put into designing the interfaces are really meant to minimize that learning curve. Well, we're now at an inflection point where technology can bend itself around the customer. Because of the ability to build statistical models, and I use the who remembers WYSIWYG as a term, right? What you see is what you get, right? I like, and it's not as good, and maybe it won't catch on, but I like, do what I mean, not what I say. And that's de whim to whiz. So, but that's the end state that we're going at. It's, when you're working out in the oil field and you've been doing that for 10 years with the guy next to you, Alex, I go, hey, Alex, hand me the sumbitch, and it would be that you know exactly what I want. And because we can learn as this technology improves, we'll be able to respond to those types of utterances in the correct way or the intended way.
I do think you can use the signals you already have instead of wearables, and we see the same. Wearables are not a huge. Yesterday's announcement from Amazon, the $50 dot, that makes it easy. One, and we've been using, say, presence based on Wi-Fi for almost a year now.
Yeah.
We don't ask you to set up geofencing, none of that. We simply detect when you come home and leave. But this could go much further, because it's actually, what we see is a smartphone is a better wearable than a wearable, because people carry the phones with them all the time. They sleep with the phones in their pocket. So we think just with Wi-Fi, you can detect interesting patterns about where you are. So the data sources are there. I think I think maybe a year, 2 years from now, it's a matter of plugging the data sources into, whether it's Alexa or Josh, the platform, where they make an intelligent decision about the intent.
I just want to add one quick comment, which is, a lot of what we're talking about is at the border of what we can currently do and what we will soon be able to do. But in order to go out and actually sell these systems, the recommendation is actually play with it. Get some Echoes in your home, get a Josh system, understand what it can actually do. Because again, it's easy for us to talk about, things that we know it will be able to achieve at some point, and all these, location-based sensors and whatnot. But the reality is, where we are today, if you want to get a customer to buy it, you really have to kind of try the product, see what it's like, so you understand what its limitations are.
Alex, to your point about people don't want to necessarily wear a wearable all the time, feel like it's handcuffed, and to Ram's point about, well, the phone is actually a good wearable. I mean, this is always in our hand no matter what we're wearing pretty much. I remember in 1999 or early 2000, I think it was 1999, the New York Times wrote an article asking Bill Gates what he thought the future would be like in homes and all this stuff. And he said, oh, we're going to have a patch, we're going to wear it on our skin when we walk into a room, it's going to turn on the lights, it's going to turn on the TV, it's going to know everything we like, and it's going to set the room for that. And I thought, wow, that's really ridiculous, because I don't want to wear a patch. All the way back then, I thought that, and I think many of you think that, and that goes to the handcuff idea, but we're handcuffed by these voluntarily, so I think that that's a good way. And speaking of that, we have a few minutes left before we open it to questions, and I want to ask you where you see the future, each one of you guys, where you see the future for voice control and how it pushes automation forward, not only at home, but also in the workplace, in hotel rooms. I couldn't find the light switch in my hotel room last night. After doing all the research on this stuff in the last few weeks, I was like, why do I walk into a hotel room and I'm hitting this light, it turns that off, I'm hitting that switch, I'm going to unplug the lamp, and then I have to in the morning plug it back in? That makes no sense. So I see a lot of different applications in a lot of different places, and so I have two questions. The first one, and then we'll open it to questions. The first one is, where do you see this in 5, 10 years? I know it's hard to predict that, and how does it drive automation?
Sure. So a couple things. First thing is, there's a quote I really like from the New York Times that says, we tend to overestimate what's going to happen in the next 3 years and grossly underestimate what's going to happen in 10. 3 years from now, it's going to look pretty similar to what it is now. You're going to have light switches, remotes, tablets, and echoes, voice control. It's going to be better. It's going to be a lot better, but it's not going to be a whole different world than what we know now. But 10 years from now, self-driving cars and everything else that's coming out, it's impossible to predict. And so that 5-year prediction is kind of a tough one, but our guiding principle is towards this no UI type metaphor. So we went from graphical user interfaces now to voice user interfaces, GUIs to VUIs, but what we see as the future is this idea of no user interface, no UI. The homeowner is going to have embedded microphones, embedded speakers, embedded sensors, cameras for things like facial rec and gesture rec. And really what we're trying to do is build out an artificial intelligence system. And so it's using all of those sensors, all of those different components to just make someone's life easy and magical. I should be able to point and say, turn that on. That's using voice control, it's using gesture, it's using some just image recognition. But all of those technologies are coming together. Most of them really do exist now, they're just not in the home. And so where it's going, from my point of view, voice is done. Like it's guaranteed, it's going to be here, it's already here, and embrace it. But what's beyond voice, it's about getting out of the way of the user and letting them just go throughout their daily life as magical as they can.
Yep. At Amazon, both the inspiration and the North Star for Alexa is the Star Trek computer. And if you've watched any episode of Star Trek where the interactions between people and machine or people and other people are facilitated by this sort of omnipresent intelligence that's there, that's the end game. How we get there, we need to understand preferences. Presence is a big factor of that. As it turns out, voice turns out to be a pretty good indicator of presence, and also security. So I mean, there are a number of steps that you have to take to get to the end goal. And one of the wonderful things about Amazon is that almost every single one of our products start with what we call a working backwards document. We write the press release that we want to see, and then we build the plan that will deliver what's on that press release. Every major feature of the Alexa unit starts in that fashion. So we are very forward-looking and extremely excited to see this. And there will be a day that people will think that not using voice was sort of quaint.
Yeah, from an integrator standpoint, we don't have the luxury of looking out 5 and 10 years. We're kind of looking to next week. But in the somewhat near-term future, because we're at such an early stage right now, and we're trying to set expectations because we don't want this to fail. And if we have too many failed experiences, it makes it that much harder work for us to get the mass consumer as opposed to the early adopters. And so we're very careful about how we position what voice can do right now. And I think probably the things that we're most looking forward to in the near future, and these guys are dictating our near future, but is multi-room awareness. When we do these multi-room houses, the idea that I can walk into a room and say turn off the lights and it knows that I'm there. Now we can do that with Josh, we can't do that with most of the other subsystems yet. But I also want to be able to stand in that room and say, turn off the lights in the family room. even though I'm not in the family room. So I want the opportunity to have it know that I'm there, turn off the lights or take an action based on where I'm at, but also give me the opportunity to do things in another room. Back to our nursery example, I don't want to say it while I'm in the nursery. I want to walk downstairs and then say, turn off the lights and lower the shades in the nursery. Or better yet, the baby's going to sleep.
Or the room you were just in.
Or the room, whatever, or the room I'm heading to. I mean, that's, we've started using it at home more to dictate where we're going. Turn on the lights and the music in the backyard as we're walking to the backyard. Also the lexicon, and I think Alex was the one who said, play with this stuff, start using it now, because you will find that it's not perfect. There are, depending on which products you're using and whether they've used the smart home skill or they've used the custom skill, there are limitations to both. And depending on your decision and which fork in the road you're going to take, you'll find that there are certain words that are available and certain words that aren't available through the Alexa platform. And that's a very important distinction to make, because what we look forward to is that increased lexicon. Because right now, if you use a smart home skill, you have to turn on your shades and turn off your shades, right? You can't raise your shades and lower your shades. So those things are very quickly going to change, but they're not there yet. And it goes back to that setting expectations and being careful to deliver to what you set. So, short term, that's what we're looking forward to, is increased lexicon and multi-room awareness.
I just have to add, this is a two-way conversation. A lot of the features that we've both been building out come from integrators like Cybermanner. And so if you think voice is interesting, but there's something that's not quite there that your customer wants, that feedback is directly impacting what we build. It's a two-way conversation.
So how does, you're a startup, so it's pretty easy to get in touch with you. How about Amazon? How do you get in touch with Amazon as an integrator and say, we really need this feature?
Feedback in the application itself. We did every feedback, in the Alexa companion app, there is a place to provide feedback. And that feedback is read every day. It's a part of the DNA to listen to the customer at Amazon. That's the quickest, easiest, best way to get feedback to us is that way. And then we also, have a developer forum that is monitored and used. So that's another an avenue for more conversational kinds of things. But just use the facility in the application itself.
Ram?
So I think the first, I look at that question in two different ways, and we got great answers on where the technology would go. The second also interesting question, I agree with all those answers on that, which is more context, better awareness of the location of the user and the intent. I also think the other interesting piece is today, Alexa Echo is a great success, but something like 5-10% of the U.S. households have it, and if you go outside the U.S., it's even smaller. It's more interesting for me what the mass adoption of this technology is, because that we've seen that with the smartphone. That kind of adoption is incredibly helpful for the industry, because what the installers do, it's really cutting edge. It's stuff that's 10, 20 years out there compared to what the mainstream audience gets. So I'm hoping in the next 5 years, voice will become just a massive mainstream thing. I think all the pieces are in place today with the Alexa and what's going on in the speech recognition. So I think that will be pretty interesting just to see what is already out there today, reach out to like 80% or 90% of the population.
We would love that too. Absolutely.
I think that certainly you're right, and I think this will drive mass adoption, and there'll be competitors, which will also be good. Thank you, gentlemen. I do have one more question, but I'm going to table it to open it up to questions to you, because as Pat said, everybody who puts one in wants more. I want one in my car now, which I think would be amazing. I want one in my home, in my office, in the hotel room.
Yep.
Exactly. Well, we got to figure out how to integrate it into the car.
Buy 6, get 1 free.
Got to figure out how to integrate it into the car. Anyway, I'd like to open it up to questions because I know you want more. And so if you'd step up to the microphone if you have a question, and right there, there's a microphone in the center. Step up, say your name, and ask your question. we'll answer the question. If we have time, I'll ask my last question. If not,
Where do you see the crossover between the AI behind Alexa?
I think the mic might be off, yeah. Or you might have to just bend down. No, they got it in the back. Let's see. Yeah, maybe raise it. Yeah, I think it's on. I think it's just, yeah, there you go.
That's on. Okay, where do you see the crossover between the AI behind Alexa and the AI behind Josh? Who's doing what to whom?
So the question just, I don't know if you can hear it, so I'll say, where do these gentlemen see the crossover between the AI in Alexa and Josh? Where do they see that going?
Sure. So one of the things that's really important to put out there is AI is one of these nebulous terms that means everything and nothing all at once. So I'm going to split sort of two aspects of what we think of AI really briefly. One aspect is the concept around neural networks and the technology behind a lot of what we call AI, and that's what's enabling a lot of the speech-to-text, the ASR technology. When we integrate Echo with Josh, that's all on the Alexa side, and that's a technology that they have. So it converts what you say into the actual text that can be processed. We then both have our own natural language processing engines, and that's what takes the actual text and converts it to an action. You know, in the case of turn on the lights in the living room, it understands that there's a room called a living room, it has devices called lights, and they can be put into a state that's on. And so that gets processed sort of individually. Some cases with Alexa, it passes to Control 4, it passes to Philips Hue, it passes to Josh, it just depends. But that's sort of one aspect of the AI in terms of the voice. The second thing people think about with AI is the system actually learning? And so I can't speak to what Alexa's doing in this regard, but what we're doing is we're basically monitoring and tracking just all the data in the home. So we're on the network, we're looking at patterns. So in the morning, the homeowner typically turns on their bedroom light, then the kitchen light, then the TV, then they turn off those lights, the garage opens, the garage closes. That happens 99% of the time, Monday through Friday, after a couple weeks. We now understand those devices happen in a sequence that can be automated, that can be created as a scene that automatically triggers. And so the learning that's going on behind the scenes, that's something that we're really excited about. That's in its very infancy. That's just beginning to happen. But that sort of form of AI in terms of actually learning is really cool. The other thing that we're working on is the AI aspect of learning around certain terms. So what we find is people will often, if they say something that doesn't get heard correctly or doesn't work correctly, for example, turn on the lights in the theater, let's pretend that there's no room that's known to be theater. They try it again. Maybe they say, oh, actually, we called that room the downstairs loft. Turn on the lights in the downstairs loft. What we do is, if we see that there's a failed command shortly before a successful command with a high degree of word match, we begin to understand those probably mean the same things. And so over time, the system begins to learn that that other way of referring to the room probably means the same. What we have to do, though, is get back to the user and let them know, hey, you've been trying to refer to this room as this, you probably don't think it works, now it does. And so the idea is you have to have that feedback so the user understands that they can speak naturally. But there are different aspects of AI in all of this. There's not one technology.
That's great. And there's different personalities too that come from this. Just by using Alexa, you impart some of your personality into our artificial intelligence engine. And it is a big factor in what we do. Understanding the behaviors that we can do pattern matching on and do those types of things at scale. It is, I guess, one of the differences that would be, between the two systems. But I always, I think of it more like, what's the difference between a, telephone exchange and one of these, right? I mean, today you can make calls from these without having to use a telephone exchange. You can make calls in between, each system. The same kind of thing is occurring in the cloud and local control. Being able to take some of that intelligence and put it in a small box and put it in a house, so that if you don't have an always-on internet is another area that is currently different. As this technology advances, you can expect to see more overlap, and that's, I think, a good thing. Because we approach problems differently, and customers will have a choice. You'll have a choice at some point in the future. It's not just about voice recognition. It's about sort of what you do with the information that you have.
Sir?
Hey, my name is Lou. So I have a question, and in a way you just sort of addressed it quite well, but I find that when I work with users and they interact with voice command systems, they get extremely frustrated, which I'm sure everyone here has seen. And it's even with today's top name, you know, everything right down to Siri on your iPhone often feels like a complete idiot. My question is that I don't think the people making these products are unaware of that. So is there a barrier right now in the industry that's slowing people down? The people who are so great at designing visual interfaces that understand context, that when it gets translated to voice, that gap between what we think the device should be able to do and what it's really only capable of doing today, that natural language interpretation that you were talking about, what do you think is the biggest barrier creating that lag in 2016 between Siri not feeling like an idiot and where we're going?
I'll give a quick answer, and then I'm sure you've
And
got
I know
one
you're
too.
not Apple, so I apologize for choosing a product none of you represents.
No.
So I'm giving a Cedia talk on Saturday in the Cedia booth. I've got a chart that's really interesting I'm showing that looks at the percentage of words that get matched by speech technology since the 70s. And it's basically an upward chart. It was, 20% in the beginning, 50%, 80%. About maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we broke 95%, which really wasn't good enough. And that's when Siri started coming out, and that's the reason that people say Siri's not that good. It's because when it came out, 95% is just not good enough. We've since broken through about 98%, and that's why Alexa does work very well. It's why people say it's magical. It's getting to that 99%, the 99.9% accuracy. That's kind of the magic. And so what people forget about is Siri is still an older technology relative to where Alexa is, well, relative to some others. It will get updated. The problem is we associate our first experience with what it currently is. We forget that it's gotten better. And so I would say in 2016, some of the technologies you're using are quite a few years old, and we just don't see the updates across the board evenly. So Microsoft Cortana, because it's Microsoft, we don't really pay attention, but Cortana's amazing. What they do is I think some of the best speech technology capabilities in the world. And so I think Dan will have a really interesting answer with Alexa, but it has broken through that wall. It's why Alexa is getting so well received, and that's going to follow across all the other big companies.
That's precisely right. That, at 99%, it's a game changer. As it turns out, humans understand 95% of what is told to them, right? So we are better than human right now. But when you're interacting with a machine, your expectation is that it will always understand it just as it is when you interact with another human being. But, I think we forgive, like, well, that person didn't hear it, or we say it again. We've kind of culturally adapted this. But today we're better than humans. And that's only going to get better. But when it hits the 99.9%, when we get to that level of natural language understanding, we're not that far away.
One really quick example, by the way. What gets deciphered from the spoken word to the written is only one side of it. Then the natural language processing is the other side. We often see, and we work with a number of different technologies that do the speech to text. If you say set the lights to 50%, a lot of them will decipher that as satellites to 50%. And so we handle that on the back end that says no one's going to say satellites to 50% in a home, so we understand what that means. Those assumptions are getting better over time. In our case, we're hyper-focused just on the home. In their case, they're doing a lot more stuff, with sports and weather and games. And so we basically default a little bit more easily, saying it's probably something about the home. We can be a little more sort of relaxed. They need to get it right about a lot more stuff.
Right, and to do that just out of the gate, we had teams of people that went out in North America and literally rented houses and had people come in and just read things about, just to get it right. We did that for years before we actually released the product. So getting that statistical model right. In fact, one of the researchers that was doing that was telling me the other day, yeah, sometimes the police would come because people would come into the door and they'd go out after 15 minutes, so there was all this activity in this house in the neighborhood that didn't know. But it is about building a statistical model, and the more it gets used, it's going to get better. So the more people get on it, the better it gets.
I'm going to try and squeeze in one more question, and I think that we think humans are probably more like 99 or 100% because most of us smile and nod even when we don't understand.
Well, anecdotally, it makes your teenagers speak clearly. They have to articulate to make their lights turn on in their bedrooms.
In other words, you're saying the word accuracy is 99%, but we have a long way to go in terms of context compared to humans, right?
Sir?
Hi, great presentation.
Thank you.
I think that the level of voice control is relatively shallow until you get into the deep linking that you were talking about. And deep linking works great within one developer's ecosystem, but when you're trying to move across different manufacturers' products and APIs, are there any standards bodies who are working on standardizing the APIs between these systems so that they can talk to each other? And do the manufacturers have any interest in doing that, or do they all want to be the 900-pound gorilla in the room?
So I'll give a quick response. I feel like I'm running too much of this,
Yeah.
but we wrote a blog post called The Internet of Disconnected Things. And it is one of the more difficult, aspects of building these services. In music, for example, we work with Sonos, Meridian, and Autonomic right now, and there are others that are coming out. And pretty much all the services, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, et cetera. The homeowner just wants to say, play Bob Dylan in the kitchen. And we have to figure out, what service to do that. If you default to Pandora, a Pandora station's not necessarily going to start with Bob Dylan. That's bad. So we start with if they have Spotify or something that can give us that exact match. And so deep linking in certain domains are much more well understood. But the way that we achieve that, we basically are pinging all the services simultaneously and handling, pretty complicated algorithms to rate those. Unfortunately, we're small, but even if we were big, I don't think we would change the fact that these communication protocols and these APIs are just all different. It's the Wild West. There's a really good cartoon that shows it's a bunch of people in a room saying, there are all these standards. We need to create one standard. There are 17. There should only be one. Shows them thinking and brainstorming. At the end, it shows now there are 18 standards.
Right. And you basically just stole my thunder, because for every new standard that comes out, there's always another one on its way. What's going to drive this is the consumer, right? And the ability to do these things. Like if you used to think about, how did you find a phone number 20 years ago? You looked in a book, right? Or you called 411. How do you find it today? What's the difference? Consumer and adoption is going to drive the change. The manufacturers who want to sell products are going to adapt to to the consumer demand. And having open APIs for electronic program guides, that's changed in the past 15 years. Now you can build an EPG. Anybody can. You can go to a website and get that information.
I think in the DIY space, reluctantly, a lot of manufacturers have come to the conclusion perhaps that IFTTT is going to be important. Like you pointed out, everybody wants to be the 900-pound gorilla, and they want to own that connectivity, but a service like that may be something that ends up being that connectivity glue to all, because it's become just about impossible for a single platform to have interoperability with every single new product, and there are probably 100 new products announced at Cedia today. So it's a huge challenge, I think, in DIY space. It's probably different in the installer space, but.
So is the short answer no? There are no international standards bodies working on this kind of stuff?
I'm sure there are.
Gentlemen, unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. I could speak to you all day long. I think these folks are wonderful and gave us their time and could probably sit here all day long. But I want to thank these gentlemen greatly for joining us, and I want to leave you with one thought. I think that this really is the future, and it's exciting to think about what things it can do, like turn my shower on as it unifies the Internet of Things. Eventually we'll say, Alexa, set the shower to 90 degrees and make the coffee and don't make it as hot and all this other stuff. But, Dan brought up a good point when we were talking beforehand, and this is what I want to leave you with. There are some real life-changing applications for this, and we can all think of how this could help and make our life better and less barriers to our lives. We can walk through our lives much more seamlessly. But I think that there are some life-changing things for people with disabilities, for people who are blind, for people who are deaf, and for all sorts of other people, to be able to not only change the lights for a guest that comes in if you're blind, but also to be able to turn on all sorts of other things like the radio or whatever else you need, especially as we get into the Internet of Things. I think that'll be very helpful. And for people who are deaf as well to be able to interact with this and figuring that out. But there are also obviously a lot of other people that it will help with disabilities. So I think that that's really terrific, and I think that kind of gives you the whole picture. Again, I want to thank these guys, and I want to thank you guys so much for joining us and giving us your time. Enjoy the rest of Cedia and be terrific.
Thank you, Bill.